especially, Democrats are trying to figure out how to reconnect with the electorate. And they're trying to figure out, why does Donald Trump have success with this electorate? Because he didn't create the movement. He just saw it building. He branded it and he rode the wave. He didn't invent this resentment. He just channeled it more effectively than anybody else had going forward. And if you listen to my recent conversation with Steve Bannon on the Noosphere app, Noosphere, go check it out. Get your free trial. Yes, I'm gonna, plug over, ding, 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 but check it out. It's a way for you to hear and see the entire Bannon interview, and I encourage that. But we really got deep into the movement, and obviously he believes this is a global movement, right? This isn't about Trump. Trump is just America's leader of that movement. And we spent a lot of time in the Mux dynamic and the tech oligarchy. But the through line was this: the modern populist movement, both left and right, shares one core suspicion. It's a distrust of concentrated power, right? Whether it's government, concentrated bureaucracy, corporate America, Wall Street, Silicon Valley. In the EU, it was Brussels. But that's the rally cry, right? Suspicion of what happens when you have too much power concentrated in the hands. The conservatives don't like it. Conservatives in general don't like it when they feel like it's government. I think progressives don't like it when they feel like it's Wall Street or corporate America. And COVID, and this is where I think, right, COVID, it was sort of, here you already had this movement, right? This wave was going, and COVID is almost like created, stirred things up and created a tsunami. And it accelerated this distrust. Public health responses, right, require centralized authority. But that very coordination, which was essential in fighting the virus, essential in getting the vaccines as fast as we got them, which is still remarkable. But it also became that symbol of overreach, concentration of power, right? That tension between collective good and individual autonomy, and it's a flashpoint. And now the skepticism is deeply embedded in our politics, and it's global. In this country, Democrats can't afford to ignore it or wish it away by just pointing to Trump. In some ways, Trump's questionable ethics, amoral character is a distraction, and maybe a distraction to the Democrats' inability to see what's really happening under the surface. And they've got to engage with this. They got to understand it, and they got to compete on this terrain. There was a David Brooks column he wrote last week, and I found myself nodding along quite a bit. He's been going through this same sort of search here. What are we missing? Right? And his argument is that the Democratic Party's problems are structural, and that tactical fixes, and this is something we've talked about a lot here, right? Tactical fixes aren't going to cut it. And in some ways, the closeness of this last election might be a distraction to them. The current leadership, he argues, may not, and the Democratic side may not be equipped to navigate this moment, just like, as it turns out, the Bush-Romney wing of the Republican Party just didn't have it in them to shift the Republican Party where Trump shifted it. And whatever you think of it, you may not like the direction, but it turned out to be in the best interest of the Republican Party, at least in its ability to win elections. Again, I'm not gonna, I think tariffs, and I think isolationism, I think these aren't going to be good for the United States in the long run. But in trying to have your party prepared to respond to the moment and what the electorate's frustration, that Bush-Romney wing couldn't figure out how to get there. And of all people, it turned out to be Donald Trump. So Democrats, and now they're the outsider party, and outsider parties have an inherent advantage, right? Because they too are agreeing with the voter in the voter's anger and distrust of, say, concentrated power in the elites. So look, Democrats are going to have to figure out how to become the outsider party, a party that fights concentrated power in all forms, not just going after Wall Street or corporate America, but also unlocking bureaucracies that seem to frustrate and not get things done, right? That you see that on the city level, where arguably government bureaucracies prevent, whether it's zoning, things like this, prevent or slow down progress. the very progress that progressives are trying to fight for on the national level. That's where that's where the energy is. They're going to have to push back against big tech, push back against big government, push back against, because this is where Republican Party is vulnerable. As I said, and as we discussed with Bannon, majority of the Republican electorate is pretty MAGA, but not the elected officials or the donor class. And that's part of Trump's problem right now. That's why he's got a bill that's going to politically be a big fat failure for him. There is nothing in there for his base, nothing at all. And instead, it's just tax. He's just trying to keep those tax cuts going, and nobody's going to feel any new. So it is, in some ways, that's going to be the vulnerability that Democrats might end up taking advantage of, or a third party. Because if Democrats can't take advantage of this moment, then the vacuum that's sitting out there is going to be filled by some other entity. So it's anyway. I urge you to take a listen to this interview on that front, because I do think there's something here with what, you know. There's so many ways that I think we've got to respect the fact that COVID really didn't just change our politics, but in some ways it was politics that was taking place, but it accelerated. You know, the distrust was growing, the fear of concentrated power was growing, and then COVID brought it all together, right? And it was just this extra accelerant. You know, it was this gasoline on the global fire here. And that appears, that's where what you can feel, that's where the Democrats suddenly look like the party of the status quo. All right, I want to do a little bit of, I want to pivot there. So that's, before we get to the interview, pivot to a little campaign 2026 update, my sort of notebook items. There's quite a bit out there this week that I want to get to. It has been obviously it's Wednesday morning. So what does that mean? It was yesterday on Tuesday, somebody was voting somewhere. Well, we had a pretty big somewhere. We now have our official nominees for governor in New Jersey. Mikey Sherrill, the Democratic nominee, a national security veteran. She's sort of the prototype of the type of candidate Democrats are desperate to recruit in 2026. And here in 2025, Mikey Sherrill, who was a veteran of that 2018 class, that first Trump midterm that was able to win. Abigail Spanberger, the Democratic nominee in Virginia, her and Mikey Sherrill are very close, and in many ways their two gubernatorial bids here in 2025 are linked. Well, she got that nomination, but she faces somebody who came pretty close to winning the governor's mansion 4 years ago, and Jack Ciattarelli. He has been he's been sort of hugging the MAGA movement without being pure MAGA. He's got that line, and as we know, New Jersey is a state that we've seen. It is trending, I would say, sort of a little bit towards Trump. That doesn't mean, and that doesn't mean a Republican is going to win in 2025, but it means that I think this race is going to be a lot closer. Sherrill and Ciattarelli will be a lot closer than Spanberger and Winsome and the Virginia race. Maybe I'm wrong. We'll see. The Lieutenant Governor, Winsome Earl Sears, is on a, sort of a rollout of her biographical spot. It's an outsider spot, so we'll see. Maybe she can close the gap here a little bit. But I don't know how she can go against the tide of the angry federal workers at Donald Trump, right? And so it just feels like she's swimming against a current in Virginia that's going to be tough for any Republicans to swim against. In New Jersey, well, you've got a two-term Democratic governor who's term limited. He had a tough, closer than expected reelection against the same Republican nominee. And it's quite common. It is quite common for quite a few governors had to lose a race for governor as the nominee to come back and win 4 years later. Maybe they were challenged to sitting incumbent like Ciattarelli did, came up short, but then had enough name recognition to get the nomination next time, and as an open seat, suddenly looked like the solid and safe and secure choice. So it'll be interesting. I think the question is what kind of distance Can Chitterelli get from Trump that is credible? I will say this: the whole SALT tax debate that's taking place in Congress and the reconciliation bill, if that gets rolled back, that will make a lot of cranky voters in New Jersey that could harm that. So it is one of the arguments that the SALT caucus and the Republican side, that'll be a fairly strong argument to make is, hey, if you want to strengthen the Republican brand in New Jersey, don't lower those SALT caps. So we shall see.